there are personalities or people that you build relationships with that just kind of like what you said. Hey, there's just a certain chemistry that comes along with that. The Rotolo twins are obviously fascinating, not just fascinating athletes and competitors, but just unbelievable story. And I agree with you. I've watched a lot of their content and just, man, they seem to have a really good time.
Right. Like you can tell they're just enjoying life and being themselves, and I love that.
I mean, I'm living vicariously through them. I see what they're doing. I'm like, that is so cool.
Right.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Interviewing all these athletes, is there any opportunities to learn any specific techniques that you can bring back to the mat?
Yeah, I think it's less like on the micro level. Like I'm very rarely, like occasionally, like if there was like a really spectacular finish in like a match that I'm covering, I might get a little bit into the details and the weeds on that. Like I think when I was interviewing J-Rod from B Team, and he had I think he had like finished. This was when he was going on his like buggy choke rampage. And so we got into like this long tangent about like his exact mechanics of how he finishes the buggy choke and who he studied and what he does differently. So we did kind of get into like the technical meta there. But overall, I think when I'm asking athletes questions about their experiences that I can kind of bring back into my own martial arts practice, it tends to be a little bit more high level. It's often questions about like mindset, consistency, motivation, training and life balance, especially if I'm talking to like, this is particularly common, I think, among like pure sport jiu-jitsu athletes, because as we all know, there is not a ton of money in pajama wrestling at the moment. So a lot of them do have like jobs outside of jiu-jitsu that they have to balance against essentially the training regimen of a professional athlete. So I think I get a lot of great insight talking to them about how they like maintain physical and mental motivation on the mat while also still having to like spend time doing like kind of having to code switch into a whole other world to make ends meet. Like there are jiu-jitsu athletes who work in hospitals or who work office jobs. Tammy Musamechi, for example, is a law clerk, and she'll like, I think like Mikey has talked about how she'll do like stairs every day at the office to like keep her cardio up. And stuff like that, I think can be actually like really useful for just like everyday people who want to improve their skills in the sport, because it's like it's an element of like kind of like, I guess just like it's an accessible element of athlete life that I think we can all kind of relate to, even though we are ourselves not necessarily superstar athletes. We're kind of just like, yes, having to like go back and forth between like your work and like your jiu-jitsu academy and like figuring out how you're going to space out your day is something that like we're all kind of doing, just to different levels and different extents.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's hard to get training in when you want it to be. I mean, the universe has to be aligned to train when you want to. So
Yeah.
What is the schedule, the training schedule look like for Andrea?
For me,
Yeah.
I feel like I'm actually really, really fortunate because I'm a full-time freelancer at the moment, and that like I do kind of get to make my own schedule. So I have a few kind of like anchored set moments in the day where like if I'm teaching a private or I'm covering somebody's class and coaching, or I have like an interview scheduled where I'm like, okay, I have to work around that. But aside from that, like as long as I'm like hitting deadline for major deliverables and projects, I can kind of fit in my training routine how I see fit, which I realize is like a huge privilege. But I joke all the time with like there are a bunch of former collegiate wrestlers and high school wrestlers who train at TMA. I talk to them about this sometimes where I'm like, man, it's kind of like being a student athlete again, where like all of your time is just spent either like, because it's like when you're a freelance writer, it essentially like I love my job, but it does kind of feel like just always having to like turn in homework all the time, because it's just like, all right, you have these deadlines from like multiple editors, multiple clients, like you mark up your Google Calendar with when everything is due. You have to figure out how like you have to be kind of self-motivated in terms of like how you're going to balance that workload and make sure everything gets done on time. So it like, you know, it's very similar to when you're trying to like balance term papers and exam schedules for like classes when you're in high school or at university. And then at the same time, you're trying to like make sure that you're well prepared for PANs or nationals or wherever you're going. And so it's like this constant like balance between like, okay, I'm going to like run to the gym and like take comp class, and I'm going to like run back and I'm going to like write another like 500 words on this deliverable. And I'm going to like go and hit the weight room, and I'm going to like come back. I'm going to like hop on this conference call, and then I'm like so you're like constantly kind of like going back and forth. So it is kind of funny, being an adult and sort of feeling like a teenager in some ways.